The Wailing Horror, written by Gyrannon. I've been told that my experience should be posted here cause it apparently sounds too insane to be real. So, before I start, I used to work for Black Angus in Southwest Portland, Oregon. I didn't work there for long, almost 7 months. I was hired for a janitor's position, but I later got an extra position as a graveyard dishwasher, which gave me a schedule of noon to 3 p.m., then 5 p.m. to closing, which was between 11:30 and 1 a.m., depending on how quick we got the place cleaned before fully closing. This story is about when the closing took a lot longer than normal. We ended up closing at 3 a.m. I asked for a ride from my manager cause I wouldn't be able to take the bus home. Unfortunately, he couldn't because he didn't have the money to cover the gas. So I had to walk home. Thankfully, I didn't have to work for a few days, but still the walk home was exhausting. Anyways, it was maybe 3:40, 3:50 a.m. and I was nearing the bus station. I saw a bus parked there and I thought that it wasn't available, so like an idiot, I didn't bother to rush and see. And so, just as I was getting to the station, well, that's when it takes off. I tried yelling to get the driver's attention, but no luck. I spent the extra hour cursing myself for that. You know, I shoulda, coulda done more. So anyway, I continued on. Around 4:30 a.m., I'm halfway home, and I decide to take a break from walking and sit down on the corner of a neighborhood block under a streetlight and have a cigarette. Not long after I light up, I hear just a few feet from me, "Got another one?" Now, I'm pretty good at hearing when it's in the dead of night and it's super quiet. So for me, it's like this guy just appeared out of nowhere. So I basically jumped up like someone intentionally tried to scare me. Which, if that was the intention, it definitely worked. Apparently, I scared the guy too, as he was like, whoa, sorry, I didn't mean to scare you. I was just wondering if you have an extra smoke." And while it took me a while to calm down, I eventually responded, "Yeah, sure. Where did you come from?" He tells me that he was sitting there before I arrived, and I tell him about my long walk from work and whatever else. And he gives me a logical reason as to why I didn't see him. "Maybe you were so tired from the walk that you just didn't notice me." And I figured that was a good enough reason. I was exhausted after all, so anything is possible. We ended up talking for a while, a bunch of random stuff, and I ended up sharing more than I had intended. Eventually, I felt rested up enough and I told him that I'm going to continue my walk home. He asked me which way I was heading, and since I didn't care, I told him, and he decided to tag along with me. We walked on until about 5 a.m. and were going to head our separate ways. And personally, the guy felt like a good guy, and I asked him if he wanted to meet up later. As we began trading numbers, I started hearing some crying sounds. Hearing the crying made me pause, and I asked, "Do you hear that?" And he nodded. At first I figured it wasn't our business, but he suggested, "Maybe we should check. What if it's someone in need?" I agreed, and we went looking for where the sound was coming from. As we got closer, the crying became louder, and we saw her. This woman was rocking side to side as she walked forward, seemingly aimlessly, like she was drunk. I said, "I'm betting she's just drunk and needs to walk it off." And he says, "I don't know. We can't know for sure without checking." Just as he said this, she disappeared behind a building. Without saying another word, he rushes off towards her. I wish now that I had ignored it when I first heard the wailing. I followed, but I didn't rush, I simply walked. So obviously he got there before I did. He then turned and gestured to me to hurry up, so I began running. When I got there, he points and says she's a ways down, but she's now sitting against a wall, still crying. I then say, she's probably going to pass out, and then we hear her say, "My baby," as she cries. At this point, he says, "Now I have to make sure. Wait here in case the cops come by. She may need their help." And he jogs towards her. From the moment I first heard the crying, I swear I wasn't feeling right. As if deep down I knew something was wrong. And as he got closer, that feeling intensified. He pulled out his phone and shined his light on her. I couldn't hear him from this distance, but I could tell that he was talking to her. But she just kept crying and repeating, "My baby." He then lifts her up, and after standing her up, she shoves his arms off and continues to cry, "My baby." I then yell, "So, is she all right?" And he yells back, "Call 911, there's blood on her clothes." This just became real, I thought. I opened my phone, but I only have a few bars. I didn't know at that time that it didn't matter how many bars I had. 911 would work regardless. So I decided to try and get a better signal. A short bit later, I have a better signal and I call the cops. I tell them where we found that woman and who needs help. And I was just about to tell them the location, and then I heard the screaming. My voice just stops 'cause it's not her. It's him. I ran as fast as I could back to the alley. And this is why I told you that it sounded too insane to be real. But I swear that I'm not making this up. I'm panicking right now, even though this was years ago. I wish I had tried harder to convince him. What I saw made me piss my pants. I saw him on the ground, pressed up against the wall, and she's there yelling frantically over and over, "My baby, my baby, my baby." And her stomach. There were tentacles coming out of her, grabbing him. I was frozen in utter terror. Slowly, the tentacles pulled him into her stomach, and eventually his screams stopped. I could then see her caressing her stomach while saying more softly, "My baby." That's when I hear, "Sir, are you still there?" It's the 911 operator. As the sound comes out of the phone, she looks in my direction. At that point, I take off running. I wasn't thinking about it, but when I got far enough away, I realized that I had dropped my phone. After what I just saw, there's no way I'm going back. So I continue to run the rest of the way to my home, constantly checking over my shoulder, making sure that there is nothing behind me. I finally get home and I'm drenched in sweat. I get into my apartment and my cousin half scares me to death, yelling, "Finally!" After nearly collapsing, I rush to him and I tell him that I need to use his phone because I just lost mine. He hands it over and asks, "Who are you calling?" And I tell him the cops, and I head outside just as he yells, "What for?" But I didn't respond. I just called them. I told them exactly what happened and where it happened, and that I called them earlier. Luckily, it's the same person that answered the first time. They had heard the screaming, and since I didn't respond, they had already sent officers out by tracking my phone. I asked if they found anything, but the officers were just arriving and they had me give my address and said that they would contact me later. I gave them my address and asked when I should expect to hear back from them. The dispatcher told me that she wouldn't be able to give me an exact time, but that I should stay home. I went back inside, gave my cousin back his phone, and again he asked me, "So, why did you need to call the cops?" and then I tell him that I've witnessed a murder. I didn't give him the full details because I was still shaking from the experience. I then decided to pass out because I was beyond exhausted. I have no idea what time it was or how long I slept, but I was woken up by my cousin and he says, "Hey, the cops are here." And I stumble out of bed to the living room. There are 2 cops waiting for me. I'm so tired that I say hi in a groggy tone, and I ask them what they found. They ask me, "Were you intoxicated when you call?" I give them a look like I'm being accused of something and I say, "No, I wasn't drinking. I was exhausted. I was on my way home." And then I told them the rest. They then tell me that there was nothing at the scene besides my phone. I asked about the dispatcher because she heard the screams and it certainly wasn't me. But they didn't believe me. Apparently, there wasn't anything to suggest that a murder had taken place. And later they kept probing me to see if I was under the influence of something or just trying to get attention. I swore up and down that what I saw was real and that I saw someone die. Then they say, "Maybe because you were so exhausted, you hallucinated the whole thing." At that point, I just gave up. Eventually, they handed me my phone, and then I remember that the guy that I met had already given me his phone number, and I told them to check the number. But it didn't matter. They wouldn't listen. To them, I was either high on something, imagining it, or trying to get attention. I have since never gone back to that location where we first found that thing. I don't even live in the same state anymore. But I'm still haunted by the screaming and the repeated words of, "My baby." If you ever hear crying and then later hear, "My baby," just run. Seriously, just run.